Today's video addresses what happens when certain deadlines in the contract overlap or conflict. For example, when the closing date is January 6th, but the number of days provided for in the contract for buyer approval extends past the closing date, what date controls? Is the closing date automatically extended for buyer approval? The answer is no. Under the buyer approval contingency paragraph, the contract states, if buyer cannot obtain buyer approval, buyer may give written notice to seller within a certain number of days after the effective date of the contract, and the contract will terminate and the earnest money will be refunded to buyer. Under buyer approval, buyer has the right at any time within those specified days to notify seller that he was unable to obtain buyer approval. When the buyer can't close because he does not have buyer approval, that is effective notice to seller and the contract terminates. There is nothing in that paragraph that extends the closing date for buyer to get buyer approval. There are other deadlines in the contract, however, that do provide for an automatic extension of closing. Not because the specific deadline is in conflict with the closing date, but rather because the provisions of the contract explicitly provide for the extension. The paragraph setting the closing date, paragraph 9, states, the closing of the sale will be on or before, and then you put your date in, or within 7 days after objections made under paragraph 6D have been cured or waived, whichever date is later. Paragraph 6D provides that if buyer makes timely objections to defects in the title commitment or survey, the seller is given 15 days to cure the objection and the closing date is automatically extended. Then the closing date paragraph extends the closing date for a further 7 days after that 15 days. The key for this extension, however, is timely objections. Objections are timely if made within a certain number of days after receiving the title commitment and survey, but in no event later than the closing date. So even if a date for providing the survey or the title commitment plus the time allowed for objection runs past the closing date, the buyer must object by closing to preserve his or her right to object. The closing is then extended not because of a conflict in deadlines, but under the terms of the contract itself. If you have any questions regarding deadlines in the contract, please contact me at tipoftheweek@allegiancetitle.com. Allegiance Title is your resource for results.